Christmas Eve, 28 degrees and dropping, and somewhere in the dark. On a frozen rooftop 6 stories, above a street that was about to become a burial ground. A woman was lying completely still. She had a rifle, 18 rounds. And the kind of clarity that only comes when you have already lost everything worth protecting, except the one thing that matters most. Below her, 12 Americans were about to be executed, not by the enemy. By the silence of the people who were supposed to save them, she had heard the order. Stand down. Observe only. Do not engage. She had heard the extraction birds leaving. She had heard 12 men being written off as acceptable losses by people drinking warm coffee 8,000 miles away. And then she had done something that would cost her everything. She took out her earpiece, set it down on the frost, and decided that some orders are not orders at all. They are just fear, dressed up in the language of authority. This is the story of 90 seconds, and what one woman chose to do with them. Christmas Eve, 11:58 p.m., the kind of cold that doesn't ask permission. It just enters, through the jacket, through the skin, into the bone where it sits and waits like it owns the place. Elena Holt had been on this rooftop for 47 minutes. She hadn't moved, not once. Because snipers don't fidget. Snipers don't shift their weight or blow warm air into their hands or check their phones. Snipers become part of whatever surface they're lying on. They become the roof, the frost, the dark. She was 28 degrees of cold and completely, utterly, calm below her, 6 stories down. 12 American men were about to be executed by the country served. And nobody had ordered her to stop it. Nobody had ordered her to do it either. That was the part that mattered. 3 hours earlier, Elena Holt had been exactly where she was supposed to be. Confined quarters, Building C, Fort Harlow Forward Operating Base, Eastern District. Room 114, 1 window, 1 bed, 1 desk with a water stain shaped like the state of Ohio. Her personal effects had been inventoried and secured. Her weapon locked in the armory under someone else's name. Her access badge deactivated. She was on paper, a soldier awaiting judgment. Which meant she was supposed to sit in room 114 and wait. She was very bad at waiting. The credentials were the thing. The access credentials she wasn't supposed to have anymore. 2 months of disciplinary proceedings. And somehow, the IT department at Fort Harlow had not received the memo. Or they'd received it and filed it wrong. Or someone with a conscience and terrible handwriting had made sure the paperwork got lost in the specific way that paperwork sometimes gets lost when losing it is the right thing to do. Elena didn't ask which. She just noticed her credentials still worked. And then she did what any trained intelligence analyst with 8 years of field experience and nothing left to lose would do at 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve. She logged in. What she found made her stomach go quiet. Not tight, not sick, just quiet. The specific quiet of someone who already knew something was wrong and just found the proof. The target coordinates for Alpha 6's mission sat in a grid formation across the Eastern District. A weapons cache. Small, residential block. Clean intelligence, clean briefing, clean operation, except the coordinates placed the target building at the intersection of 3 structures. 3 tall structures, with elevated positions on all sides, with clear sight lines to every ground-level approach, natural choke points at every exit. Nobody stores weapons there. That's not a storage location, that's a shooting gallery. Elena sat very still in front of her unauthorized screen for approximately 11 seconds. Counted the angles, ran the geometry in her head the way other people do arithmetic, automatically, without effort, without even meaning to. Then she closed the laptop, stood up, put on her jacket, and went to find a rooftop. She hadn't told anyone. Who would she tell? Her lawyer, who was in Phoenix for Christmas. The duty officer, who'd already logged her as confined and wasn't checking again until morning. Colonel Patricia Odom, who had 23 years of following procedure and 0 reasons to break that record on December 24th, based on the unauthorized intelligence review of a soldier currently facing court-martial. Right, so, no. She hadn't told anyone, quietly, efficiently, without drama, was retrieved the one thing she'd hidden before they took everything else. A MK-21 PSR, field strip, components, distributed across 3 locations that any competent security officer would have found immediately. Fort Harlow's security officers were competent. They just hadn't been looking in the ceiling panels of the east stairwell. The bottom of a disused ammunition crate in Storage Bay 4, the false bottom of a footlocker belonging to a corporal named Dustin Waverly, who owed Elena a favor from an incident in August that neither of them discussed. She'd reassembled the rifle in 4 minutes and 30 seconds in the dark, best time since training. Funny what clarity does for muscle memory. The rooftop of Building 7 gave her sightlines across half the Eastern District. More importantly, it gave her a direct view of Checkpoint Bravo, the intersection, the kill zone she'd seen on the screen 3 hours ago. She'd been watching since 11:11 p.m. She saw what the intelligence report had described as a small weapons cache, guarded by minimal resistance. She counted 43 armed fighters, 43, and growing, not militia, not irregular forces. The way they moved said everything. Tactical formations, communication discipline, position rotation on a schedule. These were trained soldiers wearing civilian clothes. Whoever had dressed them up and pointed them at checkpoint. Bravo had done it carefully, methodically, with months of planning and zero intention of letting 12 Americans walk back out. Elena's jaw tightened once, then relaxed, because getting angry doesn't help the geometry. She pulled up her mental map of the kill zone, identified the 7 priority targets. The commander northeast position, elevated, 640 meters, RPG operator, western building. Partial cover, 610 meters. The counter-sniper, northern rooftop, professional equipment, 700 meters. Most dangerous, would have to go third. Had to let him settle into position first. Give him the confidence of thinking he was hidden. After that, targets of opportunity, 18 rounds. She checked her wind reading, minimal. 2 knots from the northeast, temperature -2 Celsius, range confirmed. Breathing steady, she waited. While she waited, she thought about the words she'd been trying to find for 2 months, 2 months earlier. Fort Missoula, northern Montana, October 14th, 3:47 p.m. The light in Montana in October has a specific quality. Low, golden, ruthless in its clarity. It illuminates everything without warmth, shows you exactly what's there. Elena was in a prone position on a ridge 580 meters from a 2-story building that contained 4 United States Marines, a depleting water supply, approximately 60 rounds of ammunition between them, and an enemy force that had spent the previous 4 hours positioning itself with the specific patience of people who were not planning to negotiate. The radio in her ear told her differently. Negotiations are active. All sniper positions maintain observation only. Do not engage. Repeat, observation only. The voice belonged to Colonel Raymond Stahl, 58 years old, 3 combat tours. The kind of military career built on absolute precision, not just in the field, but in the application of regulation. The kind of officer who understood that the chain of command existed for a reason. That reason was not merely procedural, but moral. Individual soldiers acting on individual judgment created chaos. Chaos got people killed. Elena had read his file. She understood his position completely. She also had her eye on a man in a gray jacket on the south side of the building who was doing something that the negotiators, positioned to the north, could not see. He was attaching a device to the base of the exterior wall. Not complicated, not sophisticated, but effective. The kind of thing that when it went off would compromise the structural integrity of the south wall and everything above it, including the 4 Marines on the 2nd floor. The negotiations weren't a negotiation. The negotiations were a clock, observation only. We are 40 minutes from an agreement. Hold your position, specialist. Elena watched the man in the gray jacket finish attaching the device. Stand up, check his work, walk away, unhurried. Like someone who'd set a timer. She had maybe 10 minutes, maybe fewer. She keyed her radio, south wall. There's an explosive device. The subject just, specialist, negotiations are, sir, I have visual confirmation of an IED placement on the south exterior wall. This is not an assessment. This is direct observation from my current position. The negotiations are covers. 4 seconds. 40 minutes of diplomatic effort recalculated against one sniper's direct observation. Holt your position, Specialist Holt. We are verifying. They were not going to verify in time. She knew this. The way she knew wind speed and bullet drop and the specific angle correction required for a 580-meter shot in October light. Not as a belief, as a fact, Elena exhaled half a breath, held it, and took the shot, then 6 more. 7 shots. 7 hostile positions neutralized. 4 Marines extracted through the south wall, which was by then a dramatic choice but a viable one, given that the device had been disarmed by the first shooter's fall. Stahl had been on the radio before the last echo faded. She'd expected anger, controlled, precise, professional anger. What she got instead was something she didn't have a word for yet. He looked at her for a long moment when she came down from the ridge. Best shot I've ever evaluated. Most dangerous soldier I've ever processed. She hadn't flinched. Those are the same things, sir. He'd held her gaze for 3 seconds. For your sake, Specialist. I hope you're wrong. He wasn't angry. That was the thing that unsettled her. Walking away in handcuffs that weren't technically handcuffs, but might as well have been. He was something else entirely. She'd been trying to find the word for 2 months. On the rooftop, in the frost, with 43 targets below her and 18 rounds and 90 seconds coming, she finally found it. He had been recognizing something. He just hadn't known yet what to do with it. 8,000 miles away, or close enough that the distance felt obscene, Colonel Desmond Farwell stood in front of a wall of monitors and watched his coffee go cold. 55 years old, 30 years of service, the kind of face that has seen enough to stop showing most of it. Gray at the temples, permanent tension in the jaw, eyes that assess situations faster than the rest of the brain could process the assessment. Those eyes were fixed on screens. 636 showed a thermal image of 12 men in tactical formation moving through a street that was about to become their grave. At the head of that formation, Lieutenant Daniel Cross, call sign Alpha 6 Actual, moving with the precision of 20 years of training, leading from the front. Without hesitation, Farwell had reviewed Cross's file. 3 Bronze Stars, 2 commendations for valor, 1 reprimand for disobeying a direct order in Ramadi, because the order was wrong, and Cross had known it was wrong, and disobeyed it anyway, and brought all his men home, and received a reprimand for the privilege. Farwell had written a note in the margin of that file. Good instincts. Now he was watching those instincts walk into a trap that Farwell had approved the intelligence for. His phone rang. He knew who it was before he answered. The State Department. Not a name, not a person. The State Department as a concept calling to inform Colonel Desmond Farwell that the host nation government had activated their leverage. They had footage, surveillance footage, of American military personnel entering sovereign territory without explicit authorization. They were prepared to release it to 3 international news outlets within 90 minutes, unless all American presence in the Eastern District was immediately withdrawn. All American presence. The diplomat was very careful with language. All American presence. Not the helicopters already pulling back. Not the support elements already repositioning. All of it, including 12 men in a kill zone who were, from this moment forward, not an extraction problem. A liability calculation. Farwell had been in command long enough to know what that meant. He told the diplomat he understood the situation. He hung up. He ordered the extraction birds to abort. And then he stood in front of screen 6 and watched Daniel Cross raise his fist to halt his team, because Cross's instincts were telling him the same thing the thermal imaging was showing, and the intelligence had never mentioned. This wasn't a weapons cache. This was a burial site. Farwell's aide was 26 years old and had never once watched a commanding officer stand completely still for 6 minutes without speaking. Sir, extraction birds are clear of the hot zone. All primary assets accounted for. Primary assets, not the 12 men still fighting on screen 6. Farwell didn't respond. He was looking at Cross coordinating his team behind a concrete barrier while enemy fighters repositioned for the final assault. Cross moved like his son moved. That was the thing. That specific, terrible, unprofessional thing that Farwell had not expected and could not unfeel once he'd felt it. His son was 28 years old, stationed at Fort Carson, moved through space with exactly that efficiency. Left shoulder slightly lower than right. Weight distributed forward. His son was home for Christmas. Safe. Asleep, 12 men on screen, 6 were not. His hand moved toward the communication panel. Stopped, moved back. He knew what the directive said. He'd given part of it himself. The math was the math. Strategic alliance, regional stability, geopolitical calculus that people with more stars on their shoulders than Farwell had already approved. His hand opened, closed. He turned away from screen 6 for approximately 40 seconds. And then something on screen 12 caught the intelligence officer's eye. Sir, the intelligence officer, 31, careful, good at her job, currently looking at something on screen 12 that didn't match any friendly forces entry. Sir, we have an unidentified thermal signature, rooftop, grid reference. She read the coordinates. No friendly forces should be in that sector. Farwell crossed to screen 12. The thermal signature was motionless. Prone position. Long-form configuration suggesting a rifle. Positioned with sightlines directly into checkpoint Bravo. It wasn't moving, it was waiting. Get me identification on that position. Cross-reference deployment logs for the last 72 hours. She worked, efficiently, without questions. What she found made her pause in the way that only people who understand military records pause. A small stop. A recalibration, sir. There's a flag on a personnel file, accessed approximately 3 hours ago from a terminal in Building C Specialist Elena Holt. Sniper qualified, currently non-operational. Disciplinary review pending. Farwell looked at screen 12. What's the review for? 2 months ago, sir. Northern Montana, 4 Marines surrounded by hostile forces. Standing orders were observation only while negotiations were active. Specialist Holt engaged. Sevats, all hostile. Marines extracted without casualties. And the disciplinary action. Willful insubordination. Violation of direct orders during an active operation. Court-martial scheduled January 15th. Farwell looked at the thermal signature, completely still, professional, patient. The kind of patient that has already made its decision and is simply waiting for the right moment. Where is she supposed to be right now? Confined quarters, sir. Building C, room 114. Farwell looked at screen 12, then screen 6, then screen 12 again. She's been watching this whole time. She accessed the intelligence. She saw what was happening, and she went anyway. Nobody in the command center responded, because nobody knew what to say to that. All stations. Farwell's voice shifted into the register of irreversible decisions. New parameter. Possible unauthorized friendly in Overwatch position. Grid reference, do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage that position, sir. Should we contact her? Order her to stand down? Farwell watched the thermal signature, motionless, waiting. Already past the point where orders would matter. No, sir, she's already made her choice. He paused. And given what we just did to Alpha 6, I'm not certain we have the moral standing to countermand it. The command center went very quiet. On screen 12, the thermal signature didn't move. On screen 6, the enemy assault formation was 90 seconds from completion. Farwell's hand moved to the communication panel. This time it didn't stop. 11:59 p.m. Elena ran the sequence one final time. Commander, northeastern position, 640 meters. Wind correction 2 knots northeast. Drop compensation at range. Confidence high. Target 2, RPG operator. Western building, 610 meters. Partial cover. Right side exposure. First shot on exposure. Confidence high. 3, counter sniper. Northern rooftop, 700 meters. Professional equipment. We'll be scanning for her the moment the first shot breaks. Priority 3 because she needs the first 2 gone before he locates her position. Confidence, moderate. Will become high when he settles. 4 seconds. Targets 4 through 7. Assault formation, moving. 30-second window once primary leadership collapses. After that, targets of opportunity, 18 rounds. She did not allow herself to think about what happened when the rounds were gone. That was a problem for the person she'd be in 91 seconds. Right now, she was the person with 17 problems arranged in order of priority, a 2-knot wind, and a heartbeat that had dropped to 49 beats per minute. The enemy commander raised his hand, final signal. She recognized it. Preparation to attack formation. 30 seconds from overwhelming the SEAL position. Her watch clicked over midnight. Christmas Elena Holt exhaled half a breath, held the rest, and somewhere in the rational calculating part of her brain, a thought surfaced that had nothing to do with geometry. They don't know I'm here, not the enemy, not the command center, not 12 men, 6 blocks away, who were about to find out what 90 seconds could do when the person spending them had already decided what mattered. They don't know. And then, Queeter. It doesn't matter if they know. She'd been thinking about this wrong. 2 months of Room 114. 2 months of Stahl's careful language about insubordination and chain of command. 2 months of building a defense that was really just a detailed explanation of why she'd done the thing she would do again. Without hesitation, she'd been thinking about it as a choice she'd made once. It wasn't. It was a choice she was constitutionally incapable of not making. 4 Marines, 12 SEALs. The number didn't matter. The rank didn't matter. The orders didn't matter. People were people. And Elena Holt was the kind of person who could not watch people die when she had 18 rounds in 90 seconds and nothing left to lose. Court-martial pending. Career already over. Benefits already in question. What exactly was she protecting by staying in Room 114? Nothing go her finger found the trigger the way it always did. Not a decision, a completion. The end point of a process that had started 3 hours ago when she'd seen those coordinates and felt her stomach go quiet and known. Without analysis. What this night required. The enemy commander opened his mouth. Her finger completed its press. The rifle spoke, suppressed. Barely audible above the wind. Like a heavy door closing somewhere down the hall. 614 meters away. The commander's words died before they reached his men. 90 seconds began. She didn't watch him fall. No time to watch anything fall. Only the next target. The RPG operator, 610 meters, already raising his weapon, confused by the sudden silence from the commander's position. Second shot, the RPG operator dropped. The weapon clattered onto the rooftop, unfired. The greatest threat to the SEAL position. Gone, 8 seconds elapsed. Terk 3, the counter sniper. She could see it in his posture through the thermal scope. Head moving, scanning, professional, systematic. The way she would scan if the situation were reversed. She gave him 4 seconds. He shifted. His head cleared the ventilation unit. Third shot, 700 meters. Extended range compensation. Wind. Elevation. She had made this shot more times than she could count in qualification. This was the one that counted. Counter sniper's rifle fell from his hands. 14 seconds. Already moving to target 4. Below her. 6 stories down and 6 blocks away. Daniel Cross heard the first shot and registered it immediately. Suppressed fire. Incoming. Except the angles were wrong for incoming. The commander of the opposing force had just silently sat down and not gotten back up. Cross processed this in approximately a second. He raised his fist. Team froze. The RPG operator dropped. Unfired. Cross looked at his second in command. Luke Navarro. Navarro looked back, neither said anything, because there was nothing to say. There was only the impossible arithmetic of what they were watching. Enemy of fighters going down in organized sequence. Priority targets first. Threats in descending order of lethality. Someone was running a fire mission with no radio contact, no coordination signal, no announcement, just handling it. Cross looked up at the rooftops, nothing visible. No muzzle flash, no position indicator. The shooter was a ghost, a very precise, very purposeful ghost who had apparently decided that 12 SEALs were worth spending an unknown number of rounds on Christmas Eve without anyone asking them to. That wasn't ordered. Navarro said quietly. That was chosen. Cross said nothing, because Navarro was right, and because there was no time for the weight of that. Only the corridor being cleared. Northeast Passage. the only route offering concealment and distance from likely reinforcement. On my mark. Cross said he watched the corridor open. He gave the mark Alpha 6 moved. 23 seconds elapsed. Elena was on target 7. Moving target, grenade carrier, 590 meters. She led the movement by 18 inches. The shot caught him mid-stride. The grenades fell. Did not detonate. Small mercies. 32 seconds. She was scanning for the machine gun position when she felt it. Not heard. Felt. The round passed close enough to her left shoulder that she registered the air displacement before the sound. Then the impact. A sharp, specific pain that landed in the shoulder she'd been careful about for 2 years. The one with the scar tissue from Montana. The one the medical report had noted as healed but compromised under extreme load conditions. The countersneaper had not been working alone. She registered this. She registered the pain. 4 on a scale she'd recalibrated long ago. She registered that her left hand, the grip on the forestock, had approximately 60% of its usual reliability. She made the necessary adjustment. Braced differently, shifted weight, compensated. 43 seconds elapsed. Reloaded in the dark. One hand at 60%. One hand steady, continued the machine gun position, went down on shots 5 and 6 of the second magazine. The secondary commander attempting to rally, the scattered assault force, went down on shot 7, the flanking element. 5 fighters moving to cut off the SEAL exit corridor went down on shots 8 through 12. Rapid sequence. Each shot placed, not sprayed, placed 48 seconds. Elena scanned the northeast corridor clear. Mostly clear. A radio operator attempting to call for reinforcements. Shot 13. The radio shattered. 2 fighters blocking the exit. Shots 14 and 15. The corridor was open. 61 seconds. 3 rounds left. The SEAL team was moving. She could see them through the thermal scope, flowing through the northeast passage in the formation she'd expected Cross to use. Professional, efficient, covering each other even in the chaos. They were going to make it, she made sure. RPG operator emerged from a doorway, reserve position. She hadn't clocked him in the original assessment. And that was Mr. Snake. 12 men were 30 meters from that doorway. Shot 16. The RPG clattered away, unfired. Not her mistake anymore. A coordinating fighter on a far rooftop. 635 meters, redirecting remnants of the assault force toward the exit corridor. Shot 17. The coordinator stopped coordinating. She held the 18th round. Scanned. Scanned the battlefield was disorganized, leaderless. The remaining fighters retreating, trying to understand what had happened to their carefully planned. Months in preparation. Structurally perfect ambush. 84 seconds. She watched Daniel Cross's team reach the open ground beyond the northeast corridor. Watched them sprint. Watched them reach the extraction point where, because Farwell had made some decision she hadn't known about and hadn't been counting on, 2 helicopters were coming in dark and fast and low. She watched 12 men pile into those helicopters. Counted them. 12. All 12. The helicopters lifted, banked hard, disappeared into the Christmas morning, dark. Elena lowered her rifle. She lay on the rooftop for a moment. Just lay there. Frost against her chest, the shoulder having a detailed and increasingly vocal conversation with the rest of her body. She looked up. The stars above Fort Harlow were very clear. The kind of clear you only get at altitude in winter, each one exactly where it was supposed to be. She thought about room 114, the water stain, the inventoried personal effects, the court-martial scheduled for January 15th, still there. All of it, waiting. She sat up, began field stripping the rifle with her good arm and her less good arm, and the particular competence of someone who has done a thing so many times that capability persists even when the body argues against it. 4 minutes, 40 seconds, slower than before, acceptable. She stood, looked north where the helicopters had gone. 12 men were going home for Christmas. She turned toward the stairwell, started down. The light at the base of the stairs, the military-grade no-argument light of a security detail, appeared at the bottom. Elena Holt walked into it, steady, unhurried, head up, the way soldiers walk when they've done something they intend to answer for. Christmas morning arrived without bells. just cold, just the specific silence that follows violence. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, it's exhausted. Daniel Cross found out at 0142 hours. That was when the extraction birds touched down at Fort Harlow. Two helicopters running dark, no ceremony, just rotors and cold, and the particular sound of men who have been very close to death, stepping onto ground that is technically safe. Cross was the last off. Old habit. Leaders leave last. Boots hit the tarmac, and he stood still for exactly 3 seconds. 12 men behind him. All 12. He needed to feel that before he moved. 12. All 12. Then he moved. Colonel Patricia Odom was waiting on the tarmac. 42 years old, 23 years of service. She'd been told Alpha 6 was non-recoverable. She'd stood in her office for 11 minutes after receiving that notification, looking at 12 personnel files, 12 photographs, non-recoverable, the language of bureaucratic finality. She'd spent 11 minutes with that language, and then walked to the tarmac. Because command sometimes means standing in the cold, on the chance that the math is wrong. Math had been wrong. She counted 12 men coming off the helicopters, all 12. Welcome back. She said it, because it was the only thing true enough to say. Cross looked at her, steady. Something behind his eyes she recognized. The expression of a man who has figured something out and is not finished figuring. We need to know who provided Overwatch. Medical first. That's an order I expect you to follow. She paused. Unlike some orders tonight, Cross held her gaze for 2 seconds, then nodded. Odom watched them file toward the medical tent. She already knew the answer to his question. She'd known for 47 minutes. She just didn't know yet what she was going to do about it. Medical tent smelled like antiseptic and instant coffee, and the particular combination of sweat and adrenaline the human body produces when it has been operating at its outer edges for 3 hours. Joey Reyes sat on the edge of a cot while a medic worked on his leg, a graze, clean. He was staring at the middle distance the way people stare when they're not looking at anything in the room. Frank Brower sat 2 cots away, 8 stitches in his shoulder, which Brower accepted without flinching, in the way that men who've had multiple children accept pain. It becomes relative 3 kids at home, Emma, Jason, Sophie, currently asleep in matching Christmas pajamas. He'd seen the photo before deployment, laughed at the coordinated reindeer print, saved it as his lock screen. Still here, still yours, after the medics. After the quiet of men processing what they'd survived. Reyes opened his helmet. The photo of Maria was where he always kept it, right side, tucked under the edge of the padding. He looked at it, Maria Reyes, 22 years old, physical therapist in San Antonio. A laugh he'd been unable to accurately describe to anyone who hadn't heard it. He thought about what Cross had said on the helicopter. That wasn't ordered. That was chosen. He thought about a woman he'd never met. On a rooftop in the dark, with no support and no authorization, and no reason except the one reason that overrode everything else, because 12 people were worth it. Reyes looked at Maria's photo for a long moment, then took it out, folded it carefully, put it in his chest pocket left side. Close. And put the helmet down. Building C room 1 tween. 0743 hours. A corporal named Waverly. Extraordinarily casual. The kind of casual that means the opposite. Delivered a manila envelope to Elena's door. Mail specialist. Specialist Reyes says Merry Christmas. She took the envelope. Inside. 12 letters. Frank Brower's letter was 2 pages. Handwritten. He wrote about Emma, Jason, Sophie. He wrote about a photograph on his lock screen. He wrote about the specific thing that happens when a parent understands, for the first time with their body rather than their mind, that they are genuinely mortal and that their mortality has specific consequences for small people who don't yet understand mortality. He wrote, "You gave my children their father back. I don't have language for that. I'm trying anyway." Rice's letter was 1 page. Her name is Maria. "We got married 6 weeks ago. I would like to be around for a long time. Because of you, I probably will be. Thank you." She read all 12 at the bottom. A single page. Different paper, different handwriting, precise architectural penmanship of someone who has written formal documents for 3 decades. No name at the top. Just 1 sentence. I called you the most dangerous soldier I had ever seen. I was right. I simply had the wrong understanding of what danger means when it is aimed in the right direction. She sat with that for a long time. The water stain was still shaped like Ohio. January 15th was still 23 days away, but the envelope was in her hands. And outside, somewhere on this base, 12 men were making plans and having the specific conversation that people have when they've decided something matters more than what it costs. She hadn't asked them to. She'd specifically, deliberately, not asked them to, but they were doing it anyway, because that was the other thing about 90 seconds. You spend them alone. Every decision made alone. Every shot calculated alone. Every cost accepted alone. But what the 90 seconds make possible, that part doesn't stay alone. That part spreads. Elena pressed the letters against her chest, held them there, the shoulder hurt. She didn't move. Because some things you hold until you're sure you felt all of them. 28 minutes after touchdown, Cross assembled his team in the pre-debrief holding room. 12 men, various states of patched up, the specific unsettled quality of people who've been through something and not yet had enough time to understand what they've been through before we debrief. Cross stood at the front. Before we go in that room and tell them everything, we need to talk about what we're going to ask. 11 faces, listening. We were abandoned tonight, he said it flat, without editorializing, because it was a fact and facts don't require emotional framing. Command received a directive and made a calculation. We were on the wrong side of that calculation. The birds were called back. We were left. Nobody spoke. We were also saved. By someone who shouldn't have been there, who had no authorization, who had been explicitly ordered to confined quarters pending court-martial, and who decided, on her own, without orders, without backup, that we were worth saving. Brower said, who? Specialist, Elena Holt, sniper. 29 years old, 8 years of service. 2 months ago, she saved 4 Marines in Montana by disobeying a direct order. Court-martial scheduled January 15th. Rise. She did it again, yes. Knowing what would happen, yes. Navarro quietly. That's not insubordination. Legally it is, which means she's going to face the full weight of that. Second count, more time. She could be looking at prison Brower. Then we make sure she isn't sizeable. No elaboration. The way Brower said things he'd already decided were true. Cross looked around the room. We go into that debrief, and we tell them everything. And at the end, we tell them we want the shooter's name, officially, on record. And we tell them we will be providing testimony at her court-martial. All 12 of us. Anything short of full disclosure is something we're not prepared to cooperate with. Silence. Rise. They won't like that. Cross. Nose could cause problems for us. Cross. Yes. Rise looked around at the other 11 men. Looked back at Cross. Okay, he said, good. The debrief lasted 4 hours and 17 minutes. Cross told it straight. All of it the approach. The anomalous heat signatures. The radio call to command. The directive to hold position. The sounds of extraction birds leaving. 12 minutes of sustained combat on depleted ammunition against a force that had been preparing this trap for months. He described counting 12 men onto helicopters. When he finished, one of the senior officers said, the supporting fire element has been classified pending review. I'd like the name of the shooter. That information is, I'd like the name of the shooter. She wasn't a supporting element, Cross said. She wasn't authorized. She wasn't ordered. She was one person who chose to be there. And I would like her name, officially, on record, so that when we testify at her court-martial, all 12 of us, we can address her correctly. The room went quiet. The officer looked at Odom. Odom looked at Cross. Something happened in that look. The specific understanding between two people who have both been in situations where the rule and the right thing pointed in opposite directions. Her name, Odom said quietly, is Specialist Elena Holt. She pulled up a photograph on the briefing screen, Dervis photo. Regulation posture. Eyes that were not hard, not soft. The specific quality of someone who has looked at a lot of situations and developed an accurate understanding of what they require. She was apprehended at the base perimeter at 23 hours. Odom said. She walked through the gate. surrendered her weapon. She had a shoulder wound. The MP on gate duty requested she go to medical first. She declined. She asked to be processed. The room held that Brower. She walked in yes, knowing yes. Brower looked at the photograph. Looked for a long time. She's going to be okay? Not a question. The declaration of a man who has decided something will be true and is now in the business of making it so. That, Cross said, depends on us. Then Stahl asked to speak. He'd been quiet for the entire debrief, present, listening with the attentiveness of a man whose career has been built on understanding what testimony reveals beyond what testimony says. He waited until the other officers had their questions answered. I investigated the Montana incident, Stahl said. I recommended the disciplinary proceedings against Specialist Holt. The room didn't change temperature, but it changed something. I reviewed her file for 6 weeks, her record, her evaluations, her qualification scores, the highest in her unit across every metric. He paused. I interviewed the 4 Marines she saved, read their statements, took their testimony under oath, cross, and I recommended court-martial because the law is clear. She violated a direct order during an active operation. The law does not have a carve-out for outcomes. It addresses process. She violated the process. Navarro. So you're here to do it again. Stahl looked at him. Even I'm here, he said, because I read Colonel Farwell's preliminary report 40 minutes ago, filed at 0110 hours. He documented everything. The intelligence failure, the State Department directive, the order to abandon Alpha 6, his own decision to recall the extraction birds, and Specialist Holt's actions. He paused, recommended full disciplinary proceedings for insubordination, cross. That's what I expected. He also, Stahl said, recommended that she be recognized as the most honorable soldier involved in this operation. The room held that. He filed that on record, Stahl said. Before dawn on Christmas morning, knowing what it would cost him, Silence Cross read the face. Read the decades of procedure and precision and the specific expression of a man currently at war with his own conclusions. Why are you telling us this? Because, Stahl said, you deserve to know that there are people in the command structure who understand what happened tonight, what it means, and what it cost someone who had nothing left to spend. He stood, gathered nothing because he'd brought nothing. I'll see you at the court-martial, Lieutenant. I expect you'll want to testify. We'll all be there. I know. Stahl moved toward the door. Stopped. Didn't turn around. She's in room 114, building C, in case that's useful information. He left the door closed. Rice said, was that? Yes. Cross said, did he just? Yes. Huh. 8 days later, January 8th. Cross sat across from Stahl in the small conference room adjacent to the JAG-E offices. Strange, the only word for it, you testified against her in Montana. Cross said, I recommended prosecution based on the evidence available. She saved 4 lives. She violated a direct order. Both things were true. Stahl folded his hands. I spent 6 weeks on that case. I spoke to everyone involved, including the 4 Marines, and I recommended prosecution because the law requires it. Because if we allow individual soldiers to decide which orders to follow, based on personal judgment, we create a system where every soldier is a general. He paused. I believe that. I still believe parts of it. Which parts? The principle, not the application. There's a difference between a principle that is correct in the abstract and the correct application of that principle to a specific situation. I applied the principle correctly. I may have applied it to the wrong situation. What changed? Cross asked. I read Farwell's complete report, not the redacted summary, the complete report. He paused. And then I thought about what it means that the only person in this entire operation who made the correct moral choice is the one facing the most severe consequences. So what are you going to do? Stahl stood. I'm going to do what she did. Make a decision, accept the consequences, and be prepared to account for it completely. He left, and January 11th, a letter arrived in room 114 via Corporal Waverly. Extraordinarily casual. 1 page. Precise architectural handwriting. I've been in this branch for 30 years. I've recommended prosecution 47 times. I've been wrong before, twice that I know of. Probably more that I don't. This will be the 3rd time I know of. I can't undo the Montana proceeding. I can make sure the record reflects what actually happened in the Eastern District on December 25th. I don't expect forgiveness, offering what I have in style PS. The board will receive my full testimony, not a redacted version, not a summary. Everything. Eleanor read it twice, set it down, picked it up again. She had the word now, recognizing. He'd been recognizing something all along. Now he knew what it meant. January 15th, the room held 40 people, 12 Navy SEALs in dress uniform, 3 rows. The specific collective posture of people who have coordinated their attendance without coordinating their attendance. Cross in the front row, Brower beside him. Reyes on Brower's other side, all 12. Present in dress uniform on a Tuesday. Elena sat down at the defense table without looking at them, because if she looked at them, she was going to have a problem. And she did not intend to have a problem in this room on this day. The prosecution presented their case in 45 minutes. Clear, methodical. The charges were not in dispute. The evidence was not in dispute. Elena had stated on record that she'd done exactly what they said she'd done and would do it again. Then Aldford stood up. The defense would like to call its first witness, Lieutenant Daniel Cross, United States Navy, Alpha 6 Actual. Cross walked to the witness position, took the oath with the economy of a man who treats language as a precision instrument, and then he talked for 47 minutes, not about the law, not about procedure, not about chain of command, about 90 seconds. He described them in sequence. Precise, technical, the order of elimination, the corridor being cleared, the RPG that didn't fire, the machine gun that went silent, the flanking element that collapsed, the extraction birds that came back. He described counting 12 men onto those helicopters. Then he said, Specialist Holt didn't have orders to be on that rooftop. She had information. She had the skills to act on it, and she had a choice. She could have stayed in room 114. She would have been correct to do so. She would have been legal. She would have been safe. He paused. 12 people would not have come home for Christmas. The room was very quiet. She saved my life. Cross said she saved 11 other lives. She spent the one thing she had left, her freedom, on people she'd never met. And she walked through the gate afterward, wounded, and turned herself in, because she was prepared to account for her decision completely. He looked at the panel. I have never served with anyone with the combination of skill and courage and moral clarity that I observed from that rooftop on December 25th, and I want the record to reflect that. He sat down. 11 more witnesses followed. Took the rest of the day. Stahl testified last. My assessment of the facts has not changed. She violated direct orders twice. The facts are the facts. He paused. My assessment of what those facts mean and what this proceeding means has changed. The prosecution. In what way? In the way that assessments change when new information becomes available. Stahl looked at the panel. The system failed. The chain of command failed. The institutions that 12 soldiers trusted to make good decisions made a bad one. And Specialist Holt, one person, alone, without authorization, without support, without any remaining stake in the outcome, corrected that failure in 90 seconds. He paused. I spent 6 weeks deciding she was the most dangerous soldier I'd ever processed. I was right about the danger. I was wrong about the direction it pointed. Silence. The record reflects that Specialist Elena Holt is the most honorable soldier involved in this operation. The record also reflects that she violated direct orders. Both things are true. I trust the panel to weigh them appropriately. He stood. That's my testimony. And sat back down next to Odom, who had attended as a private citizen. Retired quietly 2 weeks ago. She sat beside Stahl without speaking. He nodded at her. She nodded back. Enough. The panel deliberated for 4 hours and 11 minutes. Elena spent those hours in a holding room with Aldford, who paced, and a cup of coffee that went cold. The specific quality of waiting that is different from all other waiting because the outcome is completely outside your control, and the only variable you could have changed was the original decision, and she wouldn't change it. She'd run the sequence in her head 100 times in 10 days, every shot, every second, every cost. She wouldn't change it. Aldford paced and made phone calls and reviewed documents and did all the things lawyers do when they are trying to feel useful in the space where outcomes happen without them. Elena sat still, thought about 12 men on helicopters, 3 kids in reindeer pajamas, Maria Reyes, who would wake up next to her husband for the rest of her life because someone on a rooftop had done the math correctly. She was prepared for prison, had prepared for it with the same methodical clarity she'd prepared for the rooftop. Assessed the situation, identified realistic outcomes, accepted them. She was 29 years old. She would have a significant portion of her life remaining even after the worst. She was prepared. What she was not quite prepared for was the specific look on Aldford's face when the door opened and the officer appeared to say the panel was ready because Aldford, earnest, young, trying, had been pacing for 4 hours and 11 minutes on her behalf. And when the door opened, he stopped and looked at Elena, and his face did something that experienced lawyers' faces are not supposed to do. She didn't know what yet. She stood and went to find out if the panel had found her guilty. Of course they had. She was guilty. The facts were not in dispute. The law was the law. Colonel Agnes Hartley, 61, career JAG, the kind of face that has spent decades distinguishing between what is legal and what is right, and knows these are not always the same country. Guilty. Count 1, willful insubordination during a combat operation. Fort Missoula, October 14th. Count 2, willful insubordination during a combat operation. Eastern District, December 25th. Elena stood straight. 12 men in the gallery didn't move. However, Hartley said the room shifted. The panel has reviewed the complete operational record, including testimony from 13 witnesses and the full after-action report filed by Colonel Desmond Farwell. The panel has considered the nature of the orders violated, the information available to the defendant at the time of violation, the outcomes of both violations, and the defendant's consistent and transparent accounting of her decisions. Panel sentences Specialist Elena Holt to time served, effective immediately, with full honorable discharge, benefits intact, and a formal notation in her permanent record that her actions on December 25th were directly instrumental in saving 12 American lives. Aldford made a sound, a very small sound, quickly controlled. The sound of someone who has been holding something for a very long time and just put it down. Elena stood straight because the room was still in session, because there were procedures, because she was not going to make a sound in this room until Hartley said, "This court-martial is adjourned." And then Cross was there, then Brower, then Reyes, then the 11 others, not supposed to be on this side of the room. That was probably a procedural issue someone would note in a report later. Nobody noted it now. Cross stood in front of her. 2 feet. "You okay?" "I don't know," she said. "Ask me in a minute." He nodded. "Mine's up." She thought about room 114. Ohio-shaped water stains. 18 rounds in 90 seconds and frozen air on a rooftop at midnight. "Yeah," she said. "I'm okay." 3 weeks after the verdict, a letter from the Department of the Army, recommending the Army Commendation Medal with Valor for actions on December 25th. She read the whole letter, then wrote one back. Aldford read it before she sent it. "Elena, you don't have to. I know, this is meaningful recognition. They don't what it is." "Then why?" She looked at him. "Because there are 4 families in Montana who never got one," she said. 4 Marines who aren't on anyone's record because that operation was classified, and the outcome was acceptable, and nobody needed to explain why a soldier was prosecuted for saving them. Their families don't know. The record doesn't reflect. And I want it to matter that they were saved, not just that I saved them. Alfred was quiet. The letter requests that the medal be awarded to the families of the 4 Marines from the Montana operation, specifically, by name, with a full account of what happened and why it matters. The Montana operation is classified, then declassify the relevant sections, or don't give out the medal. Those are the options I'm willing to accept. Long pause. "You are," Aldford said slowly, "the most stubborn person I have ever represented. Is that a legal opinion?" "It's a factual observation." She smiled. "Small, real," said the letter. He sent the letter. Answer came 6 weeks later. The Montana operation was partially declassified. The 4 Marines were named on record for the first time. Their families received formal notification. What had actually happened on October 14th, why it had been handled the way it had. What the correct historical account was, 4 families received letters, and the Army Commendation Medal with Valor was awarded, quietly, without ceremony, without press, to the families of 4 Marine Lance Corporals who had spent months not understanding why a soldier had been prosecuted for keeping their fathers and sons and brothers alive. Now they understood. Elena was not present. She didn't need to be. August. 8 months after Christmas Eve, the presidential pardon came through official channels. Full pardon. Honorable discharge confirmed. All benefits restored, Aldford called. It's done, all of it. Clean record, full benefits. The works, thank you, Dennis. You did this. I just carried the paperwork. She hung up, sat in a gas station parking lot in Phoenix, passing through on her way to a contract job in New Mexico. Private security. Protection detail for journalists covering water rights disputes. The kind of job where her skills were useful and her judgment was trusted, and nobody issued orders that required her to watch people die while she held her position. She looked at her shoulder. New scar over old scar. She'd learned not to favor it. December 24th. 1 year later. Murphy's Bar, small place. Veteran-owned. The kind of establishment that understands when a group of people need a private room and a long table and Christmas Eve without questions. Cross arrived first. He always arrived first. He set things on the table. 12 cards, envelopes, sealed arranged in a row, and in the center, a small glass ornament, clear engraved with a number. Brower came next. Mema and Jason and Sophie dropped at his mother-in-law's. Owen, 2 months old, with the same grandmother who had reportedly been delighted to have all 4, and told Frank to go to his dinner and not worry. Rice came with Maria, because Maria had said she wanted to come, and Reyes had said of course. And that was the entire discussion. 32 weeks pregnant. She sat at the table with the comfortable authority of a woman who has decided that being 32 weeks pregnant is not a reason to miss something that matters. Navarro. Mercer. The others. In ones and twos. Filling the table. Odom came alone. Retired since January. She sat at the end and looked at the ornament for a long moment. Then looked at Cross. She coming? Odom said. Dieted. Cross said, that's not what I asked. I know they waited 9 p.m. The door opened. Elena Holt, no uniform, no rank, no visible indication of 8 years of military service except the specific way she moved through a room, the economy of motion, the immediate spatial awareness, the unconscious assessment of exits and positions that people who've spent years in the field never fully unwool sweater. Dark green, jeans, hair shorter than the service photo on Cross's table, the scar on her left shoulder visible at the collar line. She stopped in the doorway, looked at the table, 12 people, plus Maria, plus a glass ornament that said 90 in the center of 12 cards with 12 names. She looked at Cross. He looked back. Nobody spoke. For 5 seconds, nobody spoke, and the silence was not empty. It was full. The specific fullness of a room that contains everything that has happened in the past year and is now waiting to see what form it takes when you put all 12 people and one person who saved them in the same space on Christmas Eve. Then every single person at that table stood up, not on a signal, not coordinated, just stood, one after another, rapid, like something moving through them from one end of the table to the other. Elena looked at 12 people standing in silence. She opened her mouth, closed it. You don't have to, she started. Yes, we do, Brower said. That was all. She walked to the table, sat down, the others sat. Cross poured her coffee. She picked up the glass ornament. She said, 90 seconds. Cross said. We counted, they felt longer, on our end too. She set the ornament down. Rise reached into his jacket, pulled out something folded. 2 pieces of paper, taped together at the top because one hadn't been big enough. He set them on the table in front of Elena crayon drawing. A person on a rooftop under a sky full of stars. A person drawn in the specific proportions of a 3-year-old's understanding of human figures. Large head, small body, arms at the wrong angles, but very clearly holding something. Long. straight below the figure, in letters almost, but not quite consistent in size. Thank you for saving my daddy. Elena looked at the drawing, the red-brown crayon of the rooftop, the blue-black of the sky, the yellow dots of the stars pressed hard into the paper by small hands, pressing as hard as they could because they wanted the stars to be bright. She picked it up, held it, and then, because she was 29 years old and had been running on clarity and steadiness for 12 months, had been in a gas station parking lot in August and a recovery room in January and a courtroom in between, and she was tired, not the bad kind, the good kind, the kind of tired that comes after you've spent everything you had on something that mattered, and now you're on the other side of it. Because of all of it accumulated, the rooftop and the charges and the courtroom and the Montana families and the pardon and the ornament and 12 people standing up before she'd even sat down and ate Stoles, a letter, and Broward kids in reindeer pajamas and the 4 Marines whose families now had letters, 32 weeks pregnant, and Aldford pacing for 4 hours and 11 minutes on her behalf because of all of it. Elena Holt, for the first time in the entire story, cried not dramatically, not loudly, just tears, the way they actually happen, without performance, without warning, with the specific quality of something that has been held a long time and is now allowed to move. She pressed the drawing flat against her chest. Nobody said anything, because nobody needed to. Reyes looked at Maria. Maria looked back. Something passed between them that was private and complete and didn't require language. Brower looked at the ornament, picked it up, held it in his palm, set it back down. Cross-watched Elena, steady, the same steadiness that had led 12 men through a corridor one person had cleared for them. Elena breathed, set the drawing down in front of her where she could see it, wiped her face with the back of her hand. Once, functional, done, looked around the table at 12 people who were alive because 90 seconds had been spent correctly. Merry Christmas, Cross said, quiet, meaning it completely. She looked at him, Merry Christmas, she said, and meant it back. Outside, Christmas lights on the street blinked on and off in the cold December air. Families drove home from dinners. Children dreamed about morning. The world continued in an ordinary, beautiful, completely indifferent way. Indifferent to the specific miracle of 13 people in a private room at Murphy's Bar who had learned what it costs to do the right thing and found out it was worth it anyway. The ornament caught the light. 90 seconds. That's all the time between what is and what could have been. That's all the time anyone ever has to decide who they are. Some people spend that time waiting for permission. Some people spend it calculating the cost. And some people, the rare ones, the ones history doesn't always name, the ones who walk through gates with shoulder wounds and don't apologize, and would do it. Again, some people spend those 90 seconds deciding that 12 strangers matter more than everything they have left. And then they pull the trigger and change everything. That's the story of Elena Holt, a soldier who was told to stand down and decided that standing down was the one thing she could not do. Not because she was reckless, not because she didn't understand the rules, but because she understood something the rules had forgotten. That institutions exist to protect people, not the other way around. And when an institution forgets that, sometimes one person on a rooftop has to remember it for them. 90 seconds. That's all it takes to decide who you are and what you're willing to spend to prove it.